Photosynthesis is complicated. What we're going to do is we are going to look at photosynthesis step by step and how you go from the energy in the food you eat to, or how you get to the energy in the food you eat. So you know that there's energy in the food you eat, right? We all eat food. Why? Because we need energy for our bodies, right? So remember the food chain: sunlight, producers, consumers, like, primary consumer, right? Secondary consumer, tertiary consumers. Okay? The energy goes into, right? Now, light is an abiotic factor. Light is not alive, but plants are. So this point right here is the point of connection from abiotic to biotic. So let's look at what happens right here. Okay? It's a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process that makes sugar from light energy. So photo, you know what that means. Photo means light. And photosynthesis is to synthesize from light. To synthesize, to create. A synthesizer creates music. Let's look at a standardized plant cell. Okay, so standardized plant cell, standard plant cell, whatever. This is not what plant cells look like. This is a diagram. Cell wall, cell membrane, large central vacuole, nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, and chloroplast. The chloroplast is the organelle of photosynthesis. The chloroplast is made up of its own bilayer. Okay? It is a membrane-bound organelle. The chloroplast has its own membrane and its own DNA. Inside the chloroplast are disc-like structures called thylakoids. Thylakoids, when you stack them up, make a granum. So a stack of thylakoids is a granum. There's also little connector tubes. I forgot what they're called. I think it's an L word. These, the thylakoids, the granum, are surrounded by a fluid type material. It's fluid called stroma. Stroma is to a chloroplast as cytoplasm is to a cell. Stroma, and then inside of the thylakoids you have a space called the lumen. All right? So the chloroplast has structures. All right? So let's zoom in on the chloroplast and see what happens. Now we know, again, photo means what? Photo means light. So photosynthesis starts with light. Light energy shines from the sun. And the sun is a star. So light energy, a photon, photonic energy, will be emitted from the star, from the sun. That comes in contact with a plant cell, which comes in contact with a chloroplast. And now, let's zoom into the plant cell. So, here's the cell wall. Here's the cell membrane, lipid bilayer. Here is the cytoplasm. And then here is the membrane of the chloroplast. And then I'll just draw a thylakoid right here. So here's a thylakoid. This is stroma. This is the bilayer of the chloroplast right here. And here's an individual thylakoid. Remember, a stack of thylakoids is a granum. I'm not going to draw a granum. I'm not going to draw multiple thylakoids. Remember, this happens all the time on every thylakoid. Multiple parts of the chloroplast are going through this process. Here's the thylakoid. Here's the thylakoid membrane. Remember, this is the lumen. Inside of the thylakoid membrane there are proteins. These are membrane-bound proteins that are embedded in the thylakoid membrane. Okay? They're embedded in the thylakoid membrane. Which means these proteins are bound to the membrane of the thylakoid. Okay? They look like this. The protein goes from the stroma into the lumen. Okay? It's like, almost, it touches both. Okay. Now you've heard of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll? You've heard of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll. More like borophyll. Right? This is where chlorophyll is. Chlorophyll's in the chloroplast, yes, but chlorophyll is inside of proteins in the thylakoids called photosystems. The first photosystem is called photosystem 2, and the second photosystem is called photosystem 1. These are very important because this is where light energy is used. All right? Now, let's look at what happens with this ray of sunlight, this beam of light coming down and coming into contact with photosystem 2. This is where water comes in. What do plants need? Plants need love, light, water, and carbon dioxide. This is where water comes in. This is why you water your plants. Water, H2O, goes through a process called electrolysis. Electrolysis. It is being broken. Using the light energy is being used to make this happen. When water breaks, it releases an electron. This is what chlorophyll does. It releases an electron. Now we have 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. Now that oxygen is not going to sit there by itself. It is going to bind with another oxygen and become O2, and then it's going to go bye-bye. The plant gets rid of it. And then you breathe it in. We breathe it in. The oxygen that you breathe comes from water. This electron that is now in photosystem 2 absorbs light energy and becomes an excited electron. And when an electron gets excited, what does an electron that's excited want to do? It wants to move. This is called an electron transport chain. These proteins, the electron will move from one protein to the next. It's in an electron transport chain. As this electron, which is a high energy electron, as it moves, some of that energy is used to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the lumen of the thylakoid. As the electron moves, it loses a little bit of energy. So then it goes into photosystem 1. What color is photosystem 1? It's green, which means it has chlorophyll. What can chlorophyll do? Chlorophyll can take light energy and pass it on to an electron. This electron's excited again. What's it going to do? It's going to move. This is constantly happening. So what ends up happening here, water is being broken, electrons are being charged, electrons are being moved, and hydrogen ions are accumulating inside of the lumen of the thylakoid. Now, good. Here we go. Next part. You have a molecule. This molecule is called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. NADP. NADP takes a little bit of that energy from the electron and puts it into a new molecule called NADPH. There's a bond between this phosphate and that hydrogen, and that's a high energy bond. This is a high energy molecule. So some of that energy from the light, from the photon, some of that energy from this photon gets put into this molecule. 2 high energy molecules are made after this process. This is one of them. The other one is called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. ATP. ATP is made right here. Remember, when the electron was going down its electron transport chain, gaining energy and moving energy, hydrogen ions were being accumulated inside of the lumen of the thylakoid. Particles move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. It's just what happens. It happens on Jupiter. It happens here. It happens everywhere. It's called diffusion. Diffusion. High concentration of particles move to an area of low concentration. So now this high concentration of hydrogen ions wants to move out of the lumen into the stroma, where there's a low concentration. It's got to do it. How's it going to do it? It's going to go through this protein, which is an enzyme. It's called ATP synthase. ATP synthase is an enzyme. It literally spins. It moves. It moves. And it converts ADP, adenosine diphosphate, into ATP, which is a high energy molecule. Adenosine triphosphate is a high energy molecule. NADPH is a high energy molecule. Now, that's it. Okay? This is the first stage of photosynthesis. There are 2 stages of photosynthesis. The light-dependent reaction, which is this, because it depends on light. It depends on light. The energy in the electron is light energy. The energy in NADPH and ATP is light energy. But we don't have sugar yet. We don't have food. There's no food here. We need food. We need sugar. This is the next step of photosynthesis. So the NADPH and ATP get sent to another stage called the Calvin cycle. The second part of photosynthesis is the Calvin cycle, or the light-independent reaction. And here is where carbon dioxide comes into play. CO2. That's the stuff we exhale. CO2 comes into the Calvin cycle. And what ends up happening is that the energy from NADPH and ATP, NADPH goes into the Calvin cycle, and that energy is used to break apart CO2 and then to rebuild new types of carbon-based molecules. It is converted into NADP, and this then goes back to the light-dependent reaction for recharging. ATP does the same thing. Remember, ATP is a high energy molecule. It goes into the Calvin cycle, that energy is used, and then it becomes ADP. And that ADP then goes back to the light-dependent reaction for recharging. What ends up happening from this carbon dioxide and the use of these energy molecules, the Calvin cycle is a beautiful process. It's incredible. I'm not going into the specifics. What you end up with is you end up with a 3-carbon molecule at the end. But once you get 2 3-carbon molecules, they attach to each other in different configurations to make different types of sugars. Cellulose, sucralose, fructose, sucrose, fructose, right? Glucose. Glucose, C6H12O6. This is a 6-carbon sugar. Okay? This is a high energy molecule. Sugar is a high energy molecule. Sugar is a high energy molecule. The energy in sugar came from ATP and NADPH. The energy in ATP and NADPH came from the electrons in the light-dependent reaction. The energy in the electrons from the light-dependent reaction came from a photon. The photon came from the sun. And the sun is a star, which means that the energy in our food is starlight energy. So when you blink, Your eyes, when you blink your eyes and your heart is beating, your mind is working, that energy that you are using to do those things is sunlight energy. Photosynthesis. See you next time.